3 bone-chilling true tales that haunt you at midnight forever. There are stories that crawl under your skin, twisting in your heart, echoing through the dark. They linger, haunting the edges of your mind. Tonight, we dive into 3 tales that grip your soul, leaving you breathless and shivering with dread. These are not just stories. They are windows into the horrors that exist when the clock strikes midnight, when shadows wrap around you tighter than a shroud. Imagine this. A couple moves into their dream home, only to find peculiar notes tucked into the walls, chilling reminders from a past tenant who speaks of a sinister presence lurking in the corners. The air grows thick with unease as they unravel the mystery, a tension settling deep in their bones. What horrors did the last owners face? Miles away, a man walks home late at night, and a figure mirrors his every step, a sneer curling on its lips like a malevolent shadow. The streetlights flicker ominously. The air hums a note of despair as his heart races. He turns the corner, breathless, praying he won't see the face of his pursuer. And then, in a sleepy town where nothing ever seems to happen, a young girl vanishes without a trace. Her laughter, once bright and carefree, fades into chilling silence. The community buzzes with whispers, eyes darting toward the empty swings in the park. Days turn to weeks and the search turns frantic. What could have happened to her? As the sun sets, dread creeps in like a fog, cloaking the streets. The lingering question. Is there something more sinister afoot under their very noses? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the stories unfold, each thread taunts the characters, pulling them deeper into a web of fear. The couple, now obsessed with uncovering the identity of the note's author, finds themselves spiraling. Night after night, they pore over old journals, their hands trembling at every creak and groan of the house. With every revelation, they question if they're uncovering truth or unleashing a curse. The man who thought he had escaped danger soon discovers he is being followed by more than just shadows. The dark figure is relentless, a haunting reminder of mistakes he can't shake off. Frantic glances over his shoulder give way to a gnawing terror that something dreadful waits just around the corner. And the missing girl's fate? A chilling discovery in the woods sends shockwaves through the community, revealing secrets buried long ago, awakening old fears best left untouched. The swing creaks in the empty park, punctuated only by the watchful eyes of neighbors, tension thick like fog in the air. But there's more than just the discovery of truths. There's something darker lurking just beneath the surface, threads connecting the stories in ways no one could have expected. What will be revealed? What will happen when everyone's paths collide under the waning moonlight? As midnight approaches, the dread looms larger. Stay close because the next turn will leave you gasping. What awaits beyond the shimmer of the street lamps is a peril that no family, no man, and no community can outrun. The oppressive weight of the night hung thick in the air, as if the universe held its breath, waiting for something terrible to unfold. In that hushed stillness, the couple huddled against the flickering shadows in their living room. The notes, crumbling and stained, lay scattered on the table, whispering the secrets of their past owner. Mary's finger traced the edge of one, her heart thudding like a drum. "Do you think we should keep looking?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A chill skittered up her spine as she considered the bold words inked on the page. "You cannot escape what was never meant to let you go." David's jaw tightened. "We have to know what happened to them, to everyone." Just then, the house creaked, a sound too loud, too ominous. Both jumped, their breaths suspended in the air thick with dread. The whispers of the notes that seemed to echo in their minds grew louder, intertwining with the sinister creaks of the house's bones. Each sound felt alive, watchful. Meanwhile, the man, whose heart was racing just a few streets away, stumbled into the soft glow of a street lamp. He could still feel the phantom's breath upon his neck, each flicker of the light revealing and then extinguishing his fears. He turned again, scanning the empty road behind him. Had he really seen it? A figure a few steps behind, blending into the night's shadows, always watching. Sweat trickled down his brow. He quickened his pace, feet pounding against the pavement, a desperate rhythm eager to escape the terror that shadowed him. What did it want? Was it a reflection of some monstrous guilt that trailed him, or something far more sinister? The wind began to howl, a mournful cry that echoed through neighboring streets and the desolate park where joy used to linger. The swings began to sway as if stirred by unseen hands. The townspeople, now restless and paranoid, gathered like moths drawn to a flickering flame, casting nervous glances toward the empty spot where the girl had played. "Did you hear?" murmured one, as they huddled together, their faces pale. They found something in the woods. Just then, a shriek cut through the air, a mother's desperate wail, and the group turned, eyes wide, shock like icy claws gripping their hearts. What had they uncovered? What secrets lingered beneath the soil that they walked upon, oblivious for far too long? The three stories felt as if they were spiraling together, as if the girl's disappearance, the haunted couple, and the pursued man were threads woven into a dark tapestry. The air pulsed with unresolved tension, as each player stood at the precipice of a revelation threatening to shatter them. A sudden, deep silence fell upon the town, deeper than before, wrapping around them like a noose. As breaths caught in throats, something shifted in the shadows, something hungry and eager, and the moon illuminated a figure lurking just beyond the edge of the park, its gaze piercing right through them. Would they confront the truth, or would the darkness consume them all? With hearts racing, they felt it, a connection that none could escape. Tomorrow would bring new shadows, new fears, and perhaps the final dance with horror. But all was not lost. There were whispers of help, of hope crawling in the dark, waiting to ignite their courage. Would they find it in time, or would the curse continue to grip its prey? As the clock ticked toward midnight, the question lingered like the fog: who would be next? As dawn began to break over the horizon, an eerie quiet hung over the town. The shadows from the night stretched thin, but the cold clutches of fear lingered. David and Mary sat in their living room, the crumpled notes glimmering under the first rays of sunlight, as if daring them to read further. A lingering dread resonated in the air. Mary swallowed hard, her eyes scanning the words. What if these people? What if they didn't just disappear? What if they were taken? The thought ignited a spark of terror in her gut, a reflection of the unease now building between them. David leaned back against the couch, his brow furrowing. Maybe it's not just about them. This could be bigger, deeper. We need to figure out what we're dealing with. He stood up abruptly, a fire igniting in his chest. Where are you going? Mary asked, her voice a blend of fear and concern. I need to check the woods, David determined. The townspeople talked about finding something there, remember? We can't ignore this. Just as he turned to grab his jacket, another creak echoed through the house. They froze, hearts pounding, staring at each other wide-eyed. The world outside seemed to hold its breath too. Did you hear that? Mary whispered, clutching her arms to keep the chill at bay. Before David could respond, his phone vibrated violently on the table, the shrill sound slicing through the thick silence. He snatched it up, his hands trembling. The screen lit up with a message that made his blood run cold. It was from an unknown number. You're too late. They are still here and they are hungry. Mary gasped. What does that mean? I don't know, David confessed, feeling the weight of dread settle heavily upon his shoulders. But it can't be good. In a panic, they rushed to the front door. As David swung it open, the shock of the scene outside was staggering. Crowds of anxious neighbors clustered together in the early morning light. They exchanged frantic whispers, eyes flickering with worry and disbelief. Something's wrong, one woman cried, her hand shaking as she pointed down the street. You have to see for yourselves. The couple followed her gaze, heartbeats quickening. Just past the edge of the park, White sheets fluttered in the wind, an unmistakable signal of tragedy. Is that? Mary felt herself drift into the suffocating embrace of panic. One of the officers, his expression hardened by the weight of grim duty, turned toward them and nodded. We found remains. David and Mary exchanged helpless glances, words trapped in their throats. The desire to rush toward the horror fought against the instinct to run away, leaving them paralyzed. I shouldn't have. Mary trembled. Maybe we shouldn't have looked into those notes. But deep down, they both knew this was only the beginning. The notes had led them here. They were more than just remnants. They were breadcrumbs in a dark forest, guiding them deeper into madness. Meanwhile, the man from the street lamp paused beneath the overhead lights, panting heavily. As he reached the park, his wide eyes drank in the scene, the gathering crowd, the tension crackling like static in the air. Please, tell me you know what's happening, he implored a passerby, desperation etched into every line of his expression. Instead, he got silence. The townspeople shifted uneasily, not knowing whether to speak of the lurking darkness or accept their fates in whispered resignation. In that moment, it dawned on him, what if they were all connected? What if they weren't just individuals caught in a disturbing web, but pieces of a game played by something truly sinister? With a fierce determination, he bounded toward the couple, desperate to share the terrifying vision that haunted his nights, the figure that had pursued him, the shadow that ran on instinct, tracing lines of fate leading them into the void. Yet just as they stood on the brink of understanding, another scream pierced the morning, a cry that broke through the air, bringing the dread of night crashing back down. Something was coming, something that sought to consume them all. As the sky darkened ominously despite the newfound day, an unshakable truth settled in their hearts. They had to confront the darkness together or face annihilation alone. But who among them would rise to challenge the lurking horror, and who would be claimed next? They stood frozen, the screams reverberating through the air, the crowd splintering like glass around them. David instinctively grabbed Mary's wrist, anchoring her to him. We need to find out what's going on, he urged, though the words felt weak against the rising tide of terror. Are you insane? Her voice was barely a whisper, trembling as it collided with the urgency around them. Look at everyone is terrified. What if it's us next? But David's resolve was unshakable. He propelled them forward, pushing past the mass of bodies. As they reached the edge of the park, the source of the commotion became horrifyingly clear. A group of officers huddled together around the fluttering sheets, their expressions grave, their murmurs low. Mary's stomach churned at the sight. She wanted to look away, to shield her eyes from the darkness encroaching on their reality. But something inside urged her to witness what they were dealing with. We've come this far, she murmured, almost to herself. As they approached, they caught snippets of conversations filled with alarm. There were more, one officer said, his voice breaking slightly. And this time it looks like they fought back. Fought back? David echoed, his heart racing as he felt the weight of each word. What does that mean? The officer turned sharply, and in that moment, the flicker of fear mirrored in his eyes made the blood drain from David's face. It means, he said slowly, that whatever took them, they are still out there. Before David could process this, the crowd gasped as another scream tore through the atmosphere, this one, coming from the opposite side of the park, where shadows twisted together unnaturally, almost alive. Panic erupted, watchful eyes darting in every direction. David felt the air grow thick with dread, closing in around them. Do you see it? Mary asked, her voice rising with anxiety. What are you talking about? David scanned the area, and then he saw it, a dark figure looming at the fringe of the trees, rigid and still, as if observing. Just as they locked eyes, the figure vanished, melding into the shadows, leaving only the specter of fear behind. A low murmur swept through the crowd, voices trembling as they spoke of the things they had seen, the shadowy form, the insistent whispers that punctured their sleep. David could feel the shared panic infecting each person around him. Hope waned, and despair wrapped its claws around their chests. Maybe we should head back, Mary suggested, her hands shaking. But as she spoke, The ground beneath them trembled slightly with agonizing resonance. An unearthly howl erupted from the treeline, and the silence shattered once more, sending a jolt through every heart in attendance. "Run!" David shouted, his instincts taking over as he pulled Mary with him, fighting against the currents of fear. The crowd lurched forward, a mass of bodies pushing each other towards safety as they dashed through the chaos. David felt a fleeting touch, cold and spectral, brushing against the back of his neck. He flinched and stumbled, glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see nothing but the frantic faces of their neighbors. But there it was again, the fleeting shadow, now closer, almost entwined with the crowd. "David!" Mary screamed, yanking him toward the nearest building. "We need to hide." They tumbled into a nearby cafe, slamming the door behind them. The gust of fear rattled the glass, a storm brewing just outside. David turned, panting as they leaned against the door, hearts pounding. "Did you see it?" he gasped, his brow glistening with sweat. "Yes." She trembled, her voice barely above a whisper. "What was it? What does it want?" Before David could formulate an answer, a crash resonated from the cafe's rear, sending a jarring tremor through the floor. Their eyes met, widening in horror. And in that moment, with shadows creeping through the cracks, they came to a chilling realization. They might not even be safe here. As the door lurched violently, David's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle aligning with sinister implications. Whatever had taken their neighbors was hungry, and they were next on the menu. But who or what could it be? And how could they stop it before it stopped them? The crash came again, reverberating off the walls like the heartbeat of a predator. David's instincts screamed at him to run, to escape while they still had a chance. "We need to find a way out," he barked, shifting nervously. The door trembled in its frame, as if something powerful was trying to break through. Mary nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "What if we go through the back?" she suggested, pointing toward a narrow hallway that led to the restrooms. "There might be a way outside." David hesitated, glancing at the door. The frantic scrapes echoed ominously. Sweat dripped down his back. "Okay, let us move." He took her hand, squeezing it tightly as they rushed toward the darkened hallway. The space smelled stale and musty, like forgotten memories. Shadows danced along the wall, warped and unsteady under the flickering fluorescent lights. Every step felt heavier, the air thick with dread. David's heart raced louder as he led Mary down the narrow corridor, scanning for any signs of danger. Then they heard a soft rustling, a whisper that slithered through the air. It was soft yet somehow unsettling enough to freeze David in place. Mary paused beside him, her breath catching. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, fear radiating from her wide eyes. "It's probably just the wind," he managed, though his voice was laced with uncertainty. But deep down, he knew that this was no ordinary wind. Suddenly, a dark figure materialized at the end of the hall, a ghastly shape that loomed like an ominous shadow. Panic surged inside David. He yanked Mary back, and they both pressed against the wall, desperately trying to blend into the shadows. The figure moved closer, its form shifting unnaturally, melding into the dark. It didn't walk like a human. It slid, dragging itself across the ground as if it were part of the very darkness itself. David's heart pounded in his chest. "Stay quiet," he urged, his voice a tense breath. The specter paused, tilting its head, seemingly sensing their presence. David could feel the intense gaze bore into them, even though he couldn't see its eyes. The hairs on his neck bristled. He wanted to scream, but terror knotted in his throat. Mary squeezed his hand so tightly it almost hurt. "We need to get out now." Before David could reply, the familiar sound of the cafe door burst open, the clamor of patrons outside flooding in a momentary distraction. "Help! Someone's in here," a voice shouted, cutting through the tension. It was one of the cafe staff, frantically trying to warn others. "Out that way," David shouted as he yanked Mary back toward the main room, glancing back at the shadowy figure. It lingered, hesitant yet drawn to the light pouring in from the entrance. "David!" Mary's voice squeaked as they both rushed towards the door, but he felt a pull. Something was anchoring him back. Just as he reached the threshold, his head snapped back to face the figure. It lunged for them, a swirling mass of blackness filled with the echoes of anguished cries. Time twisted in that moment. He couldn't think or breathe. Adrenaline surged as he strained to push Mary forward, desperation fueling his movements. "Run!" he yelled, shoving her toward freedom. Outside, chaos erupted. People were streaming back, eyes wide with horror as if the very ground beneath them was alive with fear. David felt himself being pulled into the crowd, but his gaze remained locked on the cafe door. Was it still there? Had it followed them? Yes, still in there. Someone cried out, pointing at the entrance. A collective gasp echoed as others turned, and the atmosphere thickened with terror. "Who was that?" Mary asked, trembling. "What is that thing?" "I don't know," David admitted breathlessly, heart racing as frantic faces surrounded them. But deep inside, a chilling thought gripped him. Whatever that figure was, they hadn't seen the last of it. And then, the first scream cut through the air again, sharp and piercing, echoing from the cafe. What did it do?" Mary whispered, her voice trembling. David felt a shiver run down his spine as he turned to face the entrance, knowing full well that whatever her answer was, it would change everything. However, in that moment of uncertainty, one terrifying truth crystallized in David's mind. Hiding wasn't enough. What would happen when it came back? The air outside the cafe was thick with panic, a tide of confusion. Shouting mingled with the sound of footsteps, people scrambling away from the entrance as if the darkness itself had tried to reach out and claim them. David's mind raced. He scanned the area, trying to make sense of everything that had just transpired. "Get back!" someone shouted, pushing their way past them. David's heart hitched. He was desperate for answers while the screams echoed in his ears, pulling him toward terror. "Where do we go now?" Mary whispered, her voice shaking. David knew that their best chance lay far away from that cafe. They had to find safety somewhere they could breathe without the weight of fear pressing down on them. "Into the alley," David shouted, pointing to a narrow path beside the cafe that led away from the masses. They ducked through the exit, pressing against the cold brick building, hearts hammering in their chests. The alley was dim and tight, the walls closing in on them as they moved further from the chaos. Shadows danced along the walls, creating a disorienting effect. David could still hear the rising cries coming from the front of the cafe, the echoes of fear reverberating in his mind. "What was that thing?" Mary asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, but it wasn't human," he replied, forcing his legs to keep moving despite the dread pooling in his stomach. "We need to get far away." As they rounded a corner, the alley opened up to a dimly lit street. The lights were flickering, casting sporadic shadows that made it feel like they were being watched. David's instincts kicked in. They needed a safe place, but it was hard to tell what was real and what was born from fear. "Look," Mary breathed as she pointed to a bar across the street. The neon sign buzzed faintly, a hint of comfort in the darkness. "Do you think we'll be safe in there?" David wondered, already taking steps toward it. He didn't want to think about what might be lurking nearby, but the bar offered a sense of normalcy, away from the horrors they had just faced. As they crossed the street, an icy gust of wind howled through the air, swirling around them. The door creaked open as they approached, and a man stepped out, concern etched on his face. "What's going on? You two look like you've seen a ghost." Something is in the cafe," David said, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "We need help." The man's face paled. "I heard the screams. I thought it was just a wild night. But if something's come out of there," he glanced back, then motioned for them to come inside. "Get in, quickly." The door slammed shut behind them, sealing them off from the chaos outside. David's pulse raced as they stepped into the dimly lit bar where people sat huddled, whispering, their faces drawn and frightened. "What's wrong?" a woman behind the bar asked, the nervous tremor in her voice echoing the fear in David's heart. "There was something in the cafe," Mary gasped, still shaking. "It attacked us enough." The bartender interrupted, his eyes darting to the door. The tension in the room mounted. No more talk of monsters. This is a safe place. David felt a mixture of dread and disbelief. This isn't just any story. We need to warn people. Suddenly, the sound of a crashing noise broke through the air, followed by an eerily familiar echo. The patrons turned towards the door, eyes widening in horror. David felt cold fear wrap around him. It had come. The darkness that had chased them was not far behind. What is happening? One person asked, panic rising. David tried to speak, but words lodged in his throat. Was there truly nowhere safe? The echo of the shattering glass faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. The bartender's face blanched. Lock all the doors, he ordered, but it was too late. They all turned as the door creaked open again, letting in just a sliver of shadow. And in that flicker of light, they all knew the truth. There was no escaping it. What awaited them within the darkened doorway? The door swung open, inching wider as if inviting dread inside. David held his breath, staring into the blackness beyond, feeling as if the air itself had stiffened around him. What is it? A man near the bar shouted, clutching his drink, eyes wild with fear. The atmosphere crackled with anxious anticipation, hearts drumming like desperate war drums. I don't know, Mary yelled, stepping closer to David, her fingers digging into his arm, grounding herself. Their world had flipped upside down, and this bar once a sanctuary felt like a trap now. Then they heard it. A low, growling noise, like deep thunder rolling across the sky, growing louder with every passing heartbeat. Shut the door, someone cried, their voice hoarse with terror. The bartender staggered forward, his face a mask of panic, reaching for the handle, determined to slam it shut and seal them off. But just then, a shape emerged from the darkness, a silhouette at first, slowly materializing into something human-like but twisted. An unnatural contortion of limbs, pale skin stretched taut over broken features, its eyes glowing like dying embers in the night. Get back, David shouted, trying to shield Mary. But as he stepped forward, the entity lunged, a snarl erupting from its lips, a sound so primal it chilled them to the core. The bartender stumbled as the creature hurtled through the doorway, knocking him aside like a rag doll. People screamed, some falling to the floor, scrambling for the nearest exit. Fists pounded against wooden tables as chaos erupted. Laughter turned to shrieks, drinks toppled, and laughter turned to cries. Run! David yelled, instinct screaming at him to flee. But he couldn't just abandon Mary. He rushed back to her, pulling her toward the bar. We have to find a way out. They ducked behind a booth, the sound of clawing and tearing ringing in their ears as the creature rampaged through the room. Glasses shattered, and the overhead lights flickered violently, casting moving shadows on the walls. David! Mary cried, her face pale, a tear streaking down her cheek. What do we do? The feral creature bellowed, a sound that reverberated in David's chest. It was hunting and they were prey. Over there. David pointed to a back door, half hidden behind a stack of crates. He could feel the weight of every heartbeat. Every inch of the bar felt like it was closing in on them. They emerged from their hiding place, ducking low. David shoved his way through the crowd, desperate hands clawing for him, screams echoing behind as they raced toward freedom. They reached the door only to find it locked. Panic surged through him. He hammered on it with every ounce of strength. Let us out. He yelled at no one. Just then, the creature careened around the corner of the bar, eyes locked on them. Move! David shouted, throwing himself against the door with an adrenaline-fueled roar. Mary close behind him. With one final push, the door burst open, and they stumbled into the alley, their lungs filling with the damp night air. But the chill of that darkness followed them, a shadow lingering at their heels as they sprinted into the street. The sounds of the bar faded, but the echoes of screams bore into David's mind. Where do we go? Mary gasped, eyes wide with fright. Anywhere but here, David urged, glancing back. But then he stopped suddenly, his stomach churning. Look, he breathed, pointing down the street. The shadows seemed to pulse and move as if they were alive. The air was thick with something unexplainable, a fear creeping back in, lurking in the street like a specter just waiting for its moment. "What is that?" Mary whispered, trembling. David's pulse raced. He had led them into a first wave of terror, but this felt different. "Darker. Let us go," he urged, pulling her toward the sidewalk, but deep down, he wondered. What if the real horror was just beginning? The closer they got to the flickering streetlights, the more David felt the sensation of being hunted returning. What had they awoken in that cafe? And how far would it chase them? The air surrounding them felt alive, electric with anticipation. As David pulled Mary forward, pulse pounding like a war drum in his ears, shadows slithered along the walls, stretching and contracting under the flickering streetlights, whispering secrets of something sinister lurking just beyond their vision. "Keep moving," he urged, the words barely rising above the dull roar of his heart. They darted past empty storefronts and peeling paint, fear pooling in their chests. The night was thick with unease, each alley and corner casting long shadows that seemed to pulse with malevolence. Suddenly, a scream broke the stillness. It was distant yet shrill, sending goosebumps racing down David's spine. "Did you hear that?" Mary asked, her eyes wide, reflecting the tremble of panic coursing through both of them. "Yeah," he replied, inching closer to her as if by proximity could ward off the terror. His instincts screamed for them to flee, but his legs were heavy, rooted by a feeling of impending doom. In their flight, they reached a corner, and David stopped abruptly, glancing around frantically. The street felt too quiet now, the previous chaos fading into a haunting silence. "Where do we go? We can't stay out here," he said urgently, scanning for any sign of life, any sanctuary. Mary pointed to a narrow side street, barely visible in the dim light. "That way. It looks like it leads somewhere." There was a flicker of hope in her voice, and he seized it. They sprinted down the alley, dodging trash cans and debris, the stench of refuse mixing with the cold night air. As they turned another corner, David stumbled, nearly losing his balance. A wave of dread washed over him as he looked up and froze. Garbage bags were ripped open, their contents strewn wildly, as if an animal had been digging through them. "Keep going," Mary urged, pulling him along as dread gnawed at his gut. But something told him to look back. It was instinct and undeniable force that pulled him. There, just at the edge of the street beyond, within the shroud of darkness, stood the creature. It was watching, its form barely discernible, arched back, head tilted as if studying them. The glow from its eyes pierced through the blackness, chilling David to the bone. "Do you see it?" he whispered, fear tightening around his throat. Mary also turned, their gazes locking onto the figure that seemed to breathe darkness itself. "Run!" she screamed, and they bolted. They raced deeper into the maze of alleyways, each turn feeling more claustrophobic. David's breath came in ragged gasps, desperation clawing at them both. Another scream echoed a different voice, a warning. He shuddered but forced himself onward, driven by a primal need to survive. They ducked under a low-hanging awning, catching momentary refuge in the shadows. David pressed his back against the cool brick wall, eyes darting around. "What do we do?" he whispered, his voice shaking, the weight of helplessness pressing into his chest. Mary's expression morphed from shock to determination. "There has to be somewhere we can hide, somewhere we can fight back. We can't just run forever." The idea of fighting seemed ludicrous against such a horror, but she was right. They couldn't keep running without a plan. The shadows conversed around them, offering no comfort, only foreboding. Just as they were about to move again, they heard a low growl resonating through the alley, closer than before. The air thickened, suffocating under the pressure of fear as the creature approached. David glanced at Mary, eyes wide. "Whatever it is, it's hunting us. We have to fight." "Fight? With what?" she gasped, rising panic ebbing to clarity. David's mind raced. He needed to think fast. They had to confront it to reclaim their lives, or they would become victims in the breaking night. But the moment was fleeting, as suddenly, a figure emerged from the far end of the alley, cloaked in shadows. David's heart stopped. "Help us!" he shouted desperately, but the figure only laughed, a sound slicing through the darkness, thick with malice. David felt icy dread. Drown him? Who was this new enemy? What horror awaited them now? The night had so much more in store than he anticipated. Every shadow seemed to pulse, whispering the truth. It was never just about survival. It was about knowing what silence really held. And now the true chase had only just begun. The echo of the figure's laughter crawled along the alley walls, filling the space with an unnerving chill. David's heart raced. Every instinct screamed to retreat, to pull Mary into the safety of the darkened corners. But it was too late. The figure, draped in a cloak that seemed woven from shadows, stepped closer, its features indistinguishable but its presence suffocating. "Help us, please." David's voice quivered, tinged with desperation. The figure halted, tilting its head just slightly. For a moment, all was silent except for their ragged breathing, the growls of the creature closing and mixing with the potential danger they faced from the shadowy figure. "Help you?" The figure's voice was smooth, almost soothing, yet laced with a hidden malice. "What good is help when your fate is already sealed?" No, that can't be true," Mary whispered, clutching David's arm tightly. Her eyes darted around, scanning for an escape, but every route appeared just as dark and grim as the rest. "Tell us what you know." David's voice rose, a blend of fear and rage fueling his words. "You expect us to just stand here and let it take us?" A smirk flickered across the figure's face, though its features remained obscured. "Oh, the hunter is not as simple as you think. It's the shadows that you should fear. And I'm merely a guide should you choose to listen." "Listen? To what?" Mary shot back, searching for any sign of the thing that had chased them through the night. The growling intensified, circling them like a predator stalking its prey. "The truth," the figure began, "is that fear is the true weapon here. The more you run, the more powerful it becomes. You must confront it. Refuse to cower. Confront it?" David echoed incredulously. The very suggestion sent a tremor of disbelief through him. "You want us to stand against that thing?" Laughter resonated again, failing to mask the growing tension in the air. "Do you think running has saved you so far? Those in shadows are never truly lost. They always have their eyes set on you. But perhaps it's not just the creature you need to be wary of." The figure stepped forward, revealing a ghastly visage hidden under the hood. What lay beneath was a twisted face, old and young at once, familiar and foreign. David's stomach twisted as recognition pricked at his mind. This was no mere stranger. Who are you?" he stammered, reeling. But the figure only grinned, a knowing look in its eyes. "You've forgotten Haven Tiyu? The stories you brushed off as children's stories about things that hunt in the dark. Forgotten until now, of course." David felt ice spread through him. "No, you can't mean oh, yes. I am the keeper of those tales, the whispers your mind wants to erase. And now, my dear ones, they come alive to claim what is theirs." With a sudden rush, the creature's growl erupted from the darkness, reverberating against the alley walls, drowning out everything else. The shadows writhed as if in a fit of rage, and the atmosphere thickened, heavy and menacing. "Run!" David shouted again, instinct taking over. But the figure merely watched them with cruel amusement, eyes glinting in the dim light as if to savor their fear. As they dashed into the next tunnel, twisting and turning to shake whatever hunted them, David couldn't help but feel they were being toyed with, tossed between predators like pieces on an unseen chessboard. Shadows expanded and contracted around them, closing in. With every frantic step, his heart hammered louder, a ticking clock echoing their impending doom. And yet, despite the terror that chased at their heels, a single thought wormed its way through David's mind. This thing in the dark, how does it know them? They burst into an unexpected opening, the moonlight spilling onto the cold concrete, but relief was fleeting. Before them, another horror awaited, at least a dozen figures emerging from the shadows, their eyes glowing, ready to pounce. "We're not done yet," Mary choked out, fear coloring her voice. But David's mind raced with the question that twisted the knife deeper: who were they truly running from? And could they ever hope to escape the designs of things crafted from their darkest fears? And in that sharp moment, David realized the truth was lurking right behind them, waiting to pounce. The chaos around David and Mary intensified, their frantic breaths mingling with the air thick with fear. The figures before them, ghastly and twisted, appeared as if woven from the shadows themselves, eyes glowing like embers on the edge of extinction. "What do we do?" Mary whispered, her voice quivering as she stepped back instinctively, pressing against David's side. As clarity crackled through his frightened mind, David knew they couldn't let terror dictate their fate. "We stand our ground," he declared, his heart thundering, not just from fear but from a desperate need to protect Mary. The shadows around them began to swirl, pulsing in rhythm with their panic. The figures mirrored their fear, each movement eliciting an echoing growl, an insatiable hunger laced with disdain. "Face it," the cloaked figure the keeper murmured, a haunting melody lifting the tendrils of dread around them. "I'm not going to let you take her," David shouted, stepping forward, arms raised as if to shield Mary from the impending horror. In that moment, as shadows twisted and grew, the other entities began to whisper. Their voices echoed through the alley, chilling yet filled with a curious drawl. "Embrace your fears, for they are the key. Fear empowers us, gives us form." David gritted his teeth. "We are not afraid of you," he shouted, his voice trembling but resolute. Mary hesitated, her eyes darting around. What if they are right? What if fear is what keeps them alive? "No," David yelled, his heart igniting with a fierce warmth. "We are stronger together. We will use this fear, not let it use us." As he spoke, a flicker of understanding ignited inside him. The things that paraded before them were but echoes of the darkness within their own minds. With every ounce of emotion coursing through him, the fear, the sorrow, the weight of past regrets, they thrust it outward, determined to take control. And in that moment of defiance, the shadows halted. The growls transformed into chilling gasps, confusion reflected in their glowing eyes. "Channel your emotions," the keeper urged, a hint of admiration lacing its voice. The figures stuttered, unease creeping back as David felt a sudden rush of power surge through him, flowing from Mary's unwavering gaze. With a deep breath, David shouted his fears to the night. "We are not victims. You may hunt us, but we fight back. We fight with love, with hope. We want to be your prey." As those words escaped his lips, light erupted from within their intertwined hearts, warm and brilliant. It burst forth, illuminating the darkness that had sought to consume them. The shadows writhed, their forms twisting desperately against the pure radiance, tightening into restless knots of despair. Mary gasped as the brightness morphed into a protective barrier, ethereal and alive. "We can do this," she proclaimed, hand grasping David's tightly, anchoring them both against the fear that had once held dominion. Together, they faced the encroaching entities, eyes shining with newfound resolve. "You don't own us," they shouted in unison, their voices intertwining like a fierce melody. With each declaration, the weight of fear lessened, and the figures faltered, shadows retreating, losing form as the light amalgamated into a force that shook the darkness free. The air vibrated with energy, the sinister whispers fading into desperate shrieks, breaking like glass as they dissolved into nothingness as dawn began to break on the horizon. Illuminating the streets with soft light, their breaths came steadily. The remnants of the darkness that had plagued their hearts began to dissipate, their power shattered like a fragile mirror reflecting the truth. Standing amidst the chilled morning air, David and Mary turned to one another, hearts racing yet filled with a quiet understanding. They had fought not just the shadows that haunted the night, but the shadows woven within their own souls. They had awakened their courage, igniting a fire that surpassed the terrors of the dark. "It's finally over," Mary breathed, her voice still trembling, but now with relief. "No," David replied, a reassuring smile spreading across his face. "It's just the beginning." As they stepped back from the edge of despair, hand in hand, sunlight bathed the streets, illuminating the path ahead. Their journey would continue, together carving a future unshackled by fear. Their souls alight with unyielding hope, and for once, the only thing left behind were the memories of the darkness they had faced it. They had earned their freedom. As the sun climbed higher, a profound sense of possibility stretched before them. "We have so much to do," Mary said, excitement blooming like a flower in the sunlight. David nodded, determination coursing through his veins. "Together we can face anything." The world held no more lurking shadows, no unnoticed horrors overcoming the night. They were alive, they were free, and together they could conquer anything that dared collide with their dreams. As they began to walk, leaving the ghosts behind, a part of David smiled, grateful they had come out on the other side. But even as they stepped forward, a whisper floated on the breeze, a gentle reminder echoing behind them. Fear is only the beginning now. As you reach the end of this electrifying tale, it's your moment to become part of this journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will grip your soul. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and boost our community. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this intense ending. What do you think lies ahead for David and Mary? And wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Your engagement keeps these thrilling stories coming.